Deconverted Man here. This is one of the worst arguments I've ever seen. Let's get into it. Yeah. So, I don't know who wrote, I don't know what book this is from or whatever, but um, Wolves Do Apologetics presented this argument. And just want to go over how wrong it is and how bad it is. So I'll read it out because it's kind of hard to see a little bit. All right. Premise one: if naturalism is true, are faculties evolved by unguided natural selection? Premise two: if our faculties evolved by unguided natural selection, then there is no connection, either causal, metaphysical, or constitutive, between our intuitions and the corresponding facts. Premise three: a connection of this kind is a necessary condition for the intuitive knowledge. Premise four: consequently, if naturalism true, there is no intuitive knowledge. Premise five: we have intuitive knowledge. Premise six: so naturalism is not true. Conclusion: if naturalism is not true, then probably God exists. Oh my word. What a pile of incoherent writing. The argument is not written right, first of all. No logician would write an argument. Okay, so this is a hypothetical syllogism. If, okay, fine. If this, then that. That, then that, that's it. It should be premise one, premise two, conclusion. It shouldn't be like this. This is sloppy. Okay, but negating that, if X is true, then Z is true. Okay. Is there an appeal to consequence there? Possibly. If Z is true, then that's a really bad thing. So yeah, it's an appeal to consequence. And then it just asserts that we have intuitive knowledge, whatever intuition means here, I don't know. But intuitive knowledge, of course, is natural. It's something that's in our brains. So this is what I wrote about this. It's just so bad. So bad of an argument. You have to, at some level, deny biological evolution for this. I'll just read what I wrote about this because, denial of biological evolution at some level is required for this argument to even work. That is absolutely first and foremost. Premise one does this in part by misleading the audience away from natural selection and descent with modification. Unguided in premise one says unguided isn't really exactly the case. It's nature itself is the guide, the nature of the environment as well as the nature of the creature that evolves in it. If one simply denies evolution, at least in part, the problem vanishes. It's akin to having it say by random chance, as some of these arguments employ. Random chance is not the only factor in evolution. There's the filtering mechanic of death as well. So what this argument attempts to do is say, well, if it's true, you can't. I've seen versions of this argument, other versions of this argument that's like, well, if it's true, you can't really trust your senses, but you can trust your senses, so it can't be true. And that means we're right. No, it doesn't mean you're right. You haven't proven that you're right, because what you're doing is you're doing a false dichotomy. You're saying it's either naturalism or supernaturalism. No, it's a false dichotomy because supernaturalism hasn't even been shown to be a thing in the first place. So you need to prove that it's a thing at all. But they can't because it's not a thing. Anyways, P1 and P2 combine to make an appeal to consequence, at least to some degree. If X, then Z. Z is bad, therefore X must not be true. So we saw that in P1 and P2. It's like, oh, it's bad if we don't have intuition, that's bad. Okay. Why? I don't know, it just is. But we have intuition. Yeah, but what intuition is part of natural ability that we have, if intuition is even a thing, which we would need a demonstrable demonstration of, which we don't have, of course. If it's true that we're simply evolved creatures, well, we can't trust our senses. Oh no, the horror, so it can't be true. And that's me making fun of the appeal to consequence that is implicit in P1 and P2. P3, of course, is a non sequitur. It should just be part of some other argument. It doesn't belong here. How did P1 and P2 lead to it? Utter mess of hodgepodge. No logician would write it this way. So I explain what's wrong with it by reducing it down to variables. So this is what the argument actually is structured as. If X, then Z. A is true if Z is true. B needs to be true. B cannot be false. B is true. Therefore, X is false. And also, X not being true somehow means God is possible. Wow. Wow. That is an utter mess. Probably one of the worst arguments I've seen in a while. So, this isn't the only case of this type of argument. As I said, there are other versions of this. This you can't trust your senses if naturalism is true, or really what you're saying is if reality is true, you can't do this. But you can do this, so reality must not be true. See, of course they substitute reality with naturalism because they don't want naturalism to be true. They don't want reality to be true. They need a spiritual thing to be possible in some way, shape, or form. They haven't demonstrated that that's even a thing. So you take intuition, you say, what do you mean by intuition? First define that. Great. Now, make some tests to demonstrate that it's actually a thing. Make sure it's falsifiable, and then demonstrate that it's a thing. Great. Now, is that something that happens in your brain? Then it's natural. End of story. The end. That's it. It's part of how your brain works. So what it does is you say, well, but intuition, I mean, how could that be explained by natural stuff? It just doesn't make sense. And so you appeal to ignorance and or personal incredulity to just say, well, I don't understand how that works in your brain. So therefore, it doesn't. You have to have something other than just how do you explain it? How do you explain it without, and even if we don't have an explanation, that doesn't mean that your side is right. You haven't demonstrated that your side is right. You haven't even demonstrated that your side is a side. There is no demonstrable demonstration of anything other than the natural / material world as of yet. There isn't any. And there can't be, at least according to the definition of those words, that is the broad version definition of those words. And that's a problem. Let me just show you. Okay. All right. So let's see. Share screen. So Google. Supernatural. A manifestation of an event attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding or the laws of nature. Okay. So the question that I've asked over and over again to many people that is still, there's no answer to it. Nobody has answered to it. Nobody's even, a few people have attempted to answer it. How would you identify that? Let's pretend that this is real and not just, this is a definition, but I'm saying that the thing is real. See, there's a difference between this is what the word means versus demonstrating that the word is actually real. There is a difference between those things. So, pretend that this is a real thing that really exists. How would you demonstrate it? If it's beyond scientific understanding, how would you show that that's the case? You could show that perhaps our scientific understanding that we have so far means we've run out of explanations. But isn't that just an appeal to ignorance at that point? You're simply saying, well, I don't know, we run out of explanations, so it's got to be beyond science. How do you know that? You wouldn't know that. You could say, well, but that's at least for today, like we know XYZ is true, and that's all in science, but we don't know how this works, so it's got to be supernatural. How do you know that it's supernatural? And then or it's beyond the laws of nature. It's beyond physics. It's beyond. It breaks the laws of physics or something like that, right? Okay, how would you demonstrate that? How would you eliminate all the possibilities that it's not just some mundane phenomenon that you simply do not yet recognize? You don't understand it. People have made the analogy of lightning many, many times, and yet theists don't seem to get it. The apologist doesn't get it. For whatever reason, they can't get it through their head, or it seems like they can't get it through their head, that we once thought lightning was supernatural for the same reasons as presented in this very definition. If you want a different definition of that word, fine. You have your own definition of the word, whatever. Tell me how to demonstrably demonstrate that it's even a thing in the first place. You would have to somehow eliminate, in this case, you'd have to eliminate all the plausible scientific explanations and understand all that there is to understand about nature and show it's none of those things somehow. How would you do that? So my thing is usually I say, okay, my door opens on its own and I claim it's a ghost. Well, how am I justified in doing that? And you go, no. Well, why not? It's like, well, I would think that it was, something wrong with your foundation. Okay, that's a natural explanation. So we find there's nothing wrong with the foundation. Okay, well, the hinges, nothing wrong with the hinges, nothing wrong with the door, nothing wrong with the locking mechanism. The door was closed. We both confirmed the door is closed, and then somehow it opens on its own again. We see nothing there to explain it. No animals, bugs, people, no naturalistic explanation offers itself. At what point are we justified to say it must be supernatural? My argument is at no point, because we haven't demonstrated that the supernatural is a thing, or to say ghost. There's no demonstration that a ghost is a thing in the first place, and also a thing that can open a door. So say, well, my door opened on its own, and we've run out of natural explanations. It must be a ghost. You don't know that. You don't even know that you've actually run out of natural explanations either. But this is what apologists have to do. They have to, at some level, deny aspects of reality, in this case, biological evolution. And this argument was way back. C.S. Lewis made an argument like this way back when. It is basically that, if you can't trust your senses if biological evolution is true, so it can't be true. But it is true. And it's also true that you can't really trust your senses. So he's basically saying, well, but if it's true, then you can't trust your senses. Like, yeah, you can't trust your senses, so I guess it's true then. Oops. I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want biological evolution to be true, because then I have an explanation for the thing that was before unexplained by science. Look at the trees is explained by evolution. So I can't use that argument anymore. Ugh. I don't like that. I want to be able to use that argument because it's a simplistic argument. So this argument, just reworded, if it's true, then you don't have intuition. You do have intuition, so it's not true. But intuition is also natural. But you're saying, you try to say, but intuition's more than natural. But how would you even go about demonstrating that? And then to make the leap from there, pretending that we're going to ignore all the logical fallacies of the argument as well as the completely incoherent structure of that argument, and say, well, sure, we'll just grant it anyways. You go, great. How does it then go? Well, if naturalism isn't true, then maybe there's a God. Huh? What does one have to do with the other? Because what? God is not natural? I think that this is a fundamental flaw of theology because, well, at least some theology asserts that God is a supernatural thing. And if it was, then you could never prove it. You could never detect it. You could never test it. You couldn't even argue for it because it's a non category. Yet you have to argue for it because you're trying to make it seem like it's reasonable as far as a logical conclusion to have. Maybe the flaw is in calling it supernatural. Maybe that's where the error comes in. So if you say that God is part of nature, then you might eliminate those problems. But then your theology has to change. You have to adapt your theology and say, well, let me relook at the Bible and see if I can interpret something else about God here or whatever. Now, that's another interesting thing. A lot of the attributes about God, in fact, all the attributes of God, come from the holy books. So every religion that claims a God or more than one God gets their idea of God from their holy books or their passed on oral traditions or combination thereof. And you go, okay, now we know that. Shouldn't that be enough for us to say there isn't that people made this up? Therefore, it's not true because we made it up. And they'll say genetic fallacy, which is the fallacy of saying here's the origin of it. Therefore, it's false because of the origin. We made it up. Therefore, it's made up. Well, yeah, it is made up. We did make it up. But they're like, well, just because we made it up, that doesn't mean it's false. Yeah, but it's not doing it any favors either, is it? I don't know how to explain to the apologist, the theist, how wrong they are in a succinct way. And one person, the one guy that I made the video about, he was complaining about that I was rude about him and all that, and that it was an hour long and people wouldn't watch that, and he doesn't want to debate on his channel. And I'm like, yeah, just come and talk to me on my channel. Would not be a debate. You could save all our souls. He's so worried about saving our souls. And so he's probably going to say no to that. It's just that's how it goes. That's just how it goes. That was Kingdom Warriors, by the way, if you were interested in that. General intuition. The argument from general intuition. It's so bad. Yeah, it's just, I guess I have nothing else to say about it. How do I escape from socialism again? I think that this is going back to that anti-citizen X video. I think that that's the problem. Is philosophy needs a philosophy. You have to say this is real. Reality is real. Let's just start with that. Let's just assert that as an a priori thing. Let's just say that that's a fact. That reality is real. And you go, okay, great. And you go, we're in reality. We are real. Okay. We do notice, however, that our functions can fail us. This is true. Our eyesight, our taste buds, our smell, our hearing, all those things, your memory, all of that can fail you. From the inside looking out, you might not be aware of this. You might not. So there's no way to maybe get you out of that. You might be stuck in that. But the people outside of you that still exist might have a way to rescue you from that position. So, people in comas. What's it like to be in a coma? No idea. Don't want to know. Don't want to find out. What's it like from the inside looking out? Do you hear things? Do you sense things? Or is it just unconsciousness until you wake up, until you recover? Are you in a perpetual dream? Do you even know that you're in a dream? When you're dreaming, you don't know that you're dreaming until you wake up, and then you go, oh yeah, that was weird. And then sometimes in a dream you go, wait a minute, this is a dream. That's usually you wake up then, right? But sometimes you could then take control of the dream. Lucid dreaming. Oh man, I wish I could do that all the time. I'd be like, a holodeck in my brain, yay. But it doesn't have the same feeling as being awake does. You know, having a dream, it's like after it's done, you feel different about it than when you were in it. So what does that mean? You go, because different things feel different ways, and we recognize all that. And understanding all of that, the science of the mind, enables you to escape hard sophilism. I think sophilism, however you say the damn word, I can never say the damn word. Because you just say, look, reality is real. If we can't agree on that, forget it. That's where I get my lobsters exist. If we can't agree on that, we're done. So, yes, we exist. Are we perceiving each other exactly the way that we should? Who knows? But we could probably devise a test to figure that out. We could probably devise several tests to find out if you and I are seeing the same things in generally the same way. Maybe you're colorblind, so you don't see, that part of my logo is green and part of my head is brown, or maybe not. But when I say, okay, this is green, and you go, yeah, that's green, and we both agree, and then we can, well, but is your green not my green? Who cares? We both agreed on what it was. So we're probably perceiving things well enough to exist. But are we perceiving them well enough to find out the truth? I don't know. That's why we've invented science, to filter out all the problems, or at least try to filter out the problems that humans bring to the table. And that is the fact of the matter. There are people that don't perceive reality the way that the majority of the humans do. And who knows what it's like to be that person. You've probably read Helen Keller, If you haven't, you should. It's been a while since I have, but so you have different states of existence. Can you imagine somebody being born that couldn't feel or hear or see? How would they communicate? Could they even communicate? What would that be like? Would it be like anything at all? I don't know. Maybe we'd have to communicate through their taste buds or something, or smell. But what if they couldn't taste or smell? Could we interact with them at all? Maybe we'd have to put in some chips or something into their brain so we could interact with them. What would that be like from their side? Who knows? But that is a reason to be a skeptic, not to say, well, let's just believe in the woo. Let's just throw our hands in the air and say, well, let's just believe that we're all spiritual beings because I don't like the fact that I can't really trust my senses all the time. So I'm just going to pretend they're always right all the time. My intuition has always been right. When I turned left, I missed the accident that was up ahead. Yeah, but have you ever kept track of the times that it was wrong? No. You don't have like a little sheet of paper. You're like, oh, my intuition says to turn left today, and I'm not gonna turn left today and see what happens. Nothing happened. Okay, there's a data point. No, you're gonna rely on your memory. So, you in general, people who lose their grip on reality die. Extreme anorexia is an example of a psychological cause. Hyperthermia is an example of a physical cause. The victim stops feeling the cold. Yeah, exactly. Now, not always. Not always. You know. Um, it's my greatest fear to be in a medical state and brain is functioning, but I can't communicate my thoughts to anyone else. Yeah, God, that would suck, wouldn't it? I mean, um, you'd want to. I think that one would want probably to not exist at that point. You can't tell other people, but then you can't tell other people that you're tired of existing. That's why you write. You get a living will, by the way, if you're worried about that. Yeah, have a living will drawn up so that if you ever are in a state where you're not responsive, they pull whatever plug there is to pull. And of course, people are fighting these fights to enable laws where we can say, hey, look, the person said if I'm ever this way, you know, you know, inject me with something that ends me because I'm done. I don't want to be around anymore. And there's fight against it. Life is so important. We got to maintain life. It's like, no, look, look, I wanted to look. If I get this way, X, Y, and Z way, I don't want to be around. I'm done. You know. And the supernaturalistic idea that we have a spirit or soul, that there's more to our brain than just our brain. I get it. I understand it because it lets you believe that that there's a way to keep existing after your mortal body is done. And for many, that's what they're after. That's why I have that question in my book of, you have to choose, there's a God and no afterlife, or there's an afterlife and no God. What do you choose and why? And it's meant to make the theist think. I have no idea if it does or not. I don't know. Um, yeah. You still need to get the legal papers drawn up. Yeah, right. It's a difficult process to do. For some, the living will. Um, you know, it, yeah. Maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe I depending on your state, you might be able to write up what your desires are and just print it out and on a paper and have it in a sealed envelope or something that says last will or whatever, or open in case whatever, and that might be enough. But I don't know. It's I'm no lawyer, so don't I have no idea. Just look into the matter further and explore your options. But yeah, living will is something I learned about while I was doing EMT work, learning about EMT stuff. And of course for the EMT, you basically you are to assume that they want to live. So even if you have, like, they have a bracelet that says DNR, do not revive order, you as an EMT can still be like, well, I wasn't really clear about it, so I tried to bring them back to life. And you're still protected by law for that because you're supposed to just assume the person wants to come back. You could be sued. anyways, but you're probably protected. So it's like if there's a question in your mind, you're not sure that the DNR is real, or you're not sure that it covers this situation, revive the patient. Just do it anyways, because it's better to be wrong and than to have let someone die and then be wrong about that. So yeah, it's confusing and complicated. It's one interesting phenomenon that we have. You can get a DNR bracelet to have, or some people have tattoos uh, on their wrist or whatever. And of course some people say have their diabetic information on tattooed on, but of course some diabetics can't get tattoos because they're diabetics. So you know so bracelets can be lost, tattoo can't. So um hey, there's an argument for having a chip implanted in you. There you go. That contains all your medical information on it, and that can only be scanned by people that should be able to scan it, like EMTs and stuff. Like, boop, all you need is this medication. Okay, tell it to the doctor. All right, do that. Got it. No problem. You know. Anyways, I'm off topic. Whatever. So yeah, is naturalism true? What do we mean by naturalism? What do we even mean by materialism? And when it comes to those words, my stance has been to err on the side of caution, because I don't like the way that they're defined. It's the assertment that all there is the material, all there is the physical, and it's like, well, or all there is the natural, and I'm like, well, all that I know about is the material or natural. That's where I'll sit, and so that doesn't quite make me a naturalist or materialist then, because I'm not willing to say all that there is, because I don't know about everything. But you need to be able to demonstrate that there's a thing there before you say that there's a thing there. And apologists still haven't done it, and instead they're using these really badly worded, broken arguments. But maybe next time. But let's not hold our breath. Stay skeptical.